Welcome to the show. You watch UAP Truth 33. I'm John. I'm your host today. I got a good show for you. I got these clips from the 2010 press club um, statements made by Robert Hastings, Bob Solis, a few other gentlemen. One of the gentlemen that was involved with the Bentwaters incident. Those of you who don't know about that, that was in the UK, and a UFO landed in Rendlesham Forest, and some officers were sent out to investigate this. It was around Christmas time. One of the most famous UFO cases in history. For those of you that don't know, today's your day.
Off through the forest was a bright, glowing object. The best way I can describe it, it looked like an eye. It was bright red with a dark center. It appeared to be winking. It would sort of blink. It was shedding something like molten metal. It was dripping off it. It silently moved through the trees, avoiding any contact. It bobbed up and down, and at one point it actually approached us. We tried to get closer. It receded out into the field, beyond the forest, and silently exploded into 5 white objects. Gone. So we went out into the field looking for any evidence, because something had apparently been falling off it. We found nothing. But while we were searching around in the field, one of the people with me noticed some objects in the sky to the north. There were 3 or 4 objects in the north, brightly colored, changing from elliptical to round, and moving at very high speed and sharp angular movements as though they were doing a grid search. While we were watching them, somebody else noticed to the south there were 2 objects just sort of hovering in the sky. One object approached us at very high speed, best guess is 3,000 to 5,000 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood, stopped directly overhead and sent down a concentrated beam at our feet. It was about 1 foot in diameter. The best way I can equate it is sort of a laser beam. We stood there in awe. Was this a warning? Was this an attempt to communicate? Was this a weapon?
To hear about it. But the reason why I'm showing this, and a lot of you guys are already familiar with this content, but some of you aren't. And the other thing is, I want to look at this, and zoom out, look at a big picture with what's happening today with Ukraine, Russia, us, NATO. And it's almost like it's like we're, like the Cold War all over. Tensions are high. There's proxy wars going on. So I just want to look at this and in the frame of the whole 2027 narrative. And it's probably not 2027, but there's people like that are in the know, like Leslie Keene, right? Her husband was actually on the September the 11th commission, and she's a writer for the New York Times. She's spoken in 2027. She's hinted around that we've only got a few more years, if that. Ross Coldhart says everybody he speaks to is looking at him with a very serious face, saying, "Listen, man, people need to find out about this. That there's something coming down the pike." And it's being repeated over and over and over again. I just seen an interview with Whitley Strieber. Stephen Diener did that. It was an excellent interview. For those of you who don't go check that out. I might even leave a link in the description about it. And Whitley says he's not putting a date on anything because dates are usually these predictions usually get proven wrong 9 times out of 10, and this one probably will too. So no need to jump to conclusions. But you look at the state of the world today, and this thing going on in Ukraine is about energy. It's about natural gas. It's about energy, and the price of it, and who controls it, and monopolies, and it's a strategic. It's about pipelines and all that. It's above my head, but that's the gist of it. And I want you guys to just look at these clips and just think about, are these ETs protecting us from ourselves? And I think they are in some areas, but maybe they're not going to do that anymore. And we just need to just look at this big picture. So please stay tuned. Check out these clips. I'll be right back.
Declassified U.S. government documents and witness testimony from former or retired U.S. military personnel confirm beyond any doubt the reality of ongoing UFO incursions at nuclear weapons sites. When I say UFO, the witnesses have described these craft as disc-shaped or cylindrical-shaped or spherical. These objects are capable of both hovering and high-velocity flight, usually completely silently. Over the past 37 years, I have personally located and interviewed more than 120 of these former or retired military personnel, all of whom report UFO incidents at one or more of the following locations: nuclear missile sites, nuclear weapons storage areas, and nuclear weapons test sites in Nevada and the Pacific during the era of atomic atmospheric testing. I believe, these gentlemen believe, that this planet is being visited by beings from another world who, for whatever reason, have taken an interest in the nuclear arms race which began at the end of World War II. Regarding the missile shutdown incidents, my opinion, their opinion, is that whoever are aboard these craft are sending a signal to both Washington and Moscow, among others, that we are playing with fire, that the possession and threatened use of nuclear weapons potentially threatens the human race and the integrity of the planetary environment.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Salas. In 1967, I was a first lieutenant stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana. I was a missile launch officer. And on March 24th, 1967, I was on duty at what we called Oscar Flight. It is a underground capsule hardened site, about 60 feet underground. We had security guards topside. The main guard is called a flight security controller. My commander at the time was Lieutenant Fred Mywald. We had to call in for maintenance teams to come out and bring them back up on alert. The main indication we got from our equipment was this was guidance and control system failure. There's some special investigations in the room. He ordered us to not ever talk about this. He even signed a non-disclosure statement to that effect. This was, and I didn't talk about it until 1994. I was able to come across a little paragraph in a book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good. And on page 301 of that book, there's a short paragraph about missiles being shut down while UFOs were overhead. At that point, with the help of Mr. James Klotz, my investigator, we requested the Air Force to send us documents about this shutdown, not mentioning the word UFO. We did get the Air Force to declassify what we'll call the Echo Flight incident.
Nuclear weapons storage areas, you got to be almost. Good afternoon. My name is Dwayne Arneson. I'm going to give an adjunct testimony to what Bob has already spoken about. After graduating from college with degrees in physics and math, I entered the Air Force, got a commission, and served 26 years as a communication electronics officer in positions all over the world, including Vietnam. My highest clearance held was top secret crypto special compartment information. What Bob has already talked about, that a UFO did in fact shut down several missile silos in Montana. Not being a missile type, I didn't know Oscar Flight from Echo Flight, so I couldn't relate to any of those details. But the fact was that missiles were shut down by them. Later on, in mid-70s, about 1975, I was commander of a radar site in Maine, which was adjacent to Loring Air Force Base. Periodically, my security cop and I met with the SAC security police. And on two occasions that I can recall distinctly, they told us that UFOs were seen over the nuclear weapons storage areas at Loring Air Force Base, which was a SAC bomber base, as some of you may well know.
My name is Robert Jameson. Between January 1965 and October of 1967, I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base as a combat missile targeting team commander. Our main job was to point the missiles in the right direction. Also, we may be dispatched from time to time to a restart. In case any missile goes off alert, we have to restart and verify the targeting data.
Inspector General's Office with total inspection oversight of all services and all service agencies. In 1980, I was reassigned from the Pentagon to RAF Bentwaters as a deputy base commander. At that time, Bentwaters was one of the largest tactical fighter wings in the world. We had the 2 base complex, Woodbridge and Bentwaters in England, and 4 FOLs in Germany, and 2 additional standby bases. In December 1980, early in the morning, several of our security policemen discovered strange lights in the forest in East Anglia, just outside the back gate of RAF Woodbridge. 3 patrolmen, Sergeant Peniston, Airman Burrows, and Airman Cabanasack, actually were dispatched into the forest and approached a craft. They reported it being triangular, approximately 3 meters on a side, dark metallic in appearance with strange markings. They observed it for a period of time, and it very quickly and silently vanished at high speed. Initially, I was not aware of all the details. I was only told of strange lights, and I was sure there was a logical explanation. 2 nights later, at the family Christmas party, we were interrupted. The on-duty flight commander for the security police squadron, Lieutenant Bruce England, came and approached the base commander and I. He was white as a sheet. He said, "It's back." He said, "What's back?" He said, "The UFO." Small cassette recorder I carried everywhere when I was on duty. I was taken to the supposed site. We found indentations approximately 1.5 inches deep, approximately 6 to 8 feet on a side, and radiation of 8 to 9 times normal background radiation. Not enough to be dangerous to somebody, but significant. We also found broken branches on the trees. While we were milling around trying to make sense of the whole thing, one of the individuals with me suddenly spotted something. Off through the forest was a bright, glowing object. The best way I can describe it, it looked like an eye, with bright red with a dark center. It appeared to be winking. It was shedding something like molten metal. It was dripping off it. It silently moved through the trees, avoiding any contact. It bobbed up and down, and at one point it actually approached us. We tried to get closer. It receded out into the field, beyond the forest, and silently exploded into 5 white objects. Gone. So we went out into the field looking for any evidence, because something had apparently been falling off it. We found nothing. But while we were searching around in the field, one of the people with me noticed some objects in the sky to the north. There were 3 or 4 objects in the north, brightly colored, changing from elliptical to round, and moving at very high speed and sharp angular movements as though they were doing a grid search. While we were watching them, somebody else noticed to the south there were 2 objects just sort of hovering in the sky. One object approached us at very high speed, best guess is 3,000 to 5,000 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood, stopped directly overhead and sent down a concentrated beam at our feet. It was about 1 foot in diameter. The best way I can equate it is sort of a laser beam. We stood there in awe. Was this a warning? Was this an attempt to communicate? Was this a weapon or just a probe? Just as suddenly as it appeared, click, it disappeared. We stood there, really concerned. About that time, we noticed the other object to the south was sending down beams, about a mile and a half away over Woodbridge Base. We had 3 different radios with us, the police radio, the security police radio, and I had the command net. All 3 radios were functional. We were talking to control centers. They were constantly breaking up, and we had great difficulties communicating. But we were able to discern that on the police and security net, that some of those beams were either falling into or near the weapons storage area, and there's a great deal of concern.
3 through 1964, while I was on alert duty in the Launch Control Center at Atlas Site 9 west of Roswell, my topside security guard called me on the telephone and reported a bright light that is a fully illuminated round object was hovering silently over the missile silo and shining a light down on
Air Force in Berkeley, California, in first week of November 1962. At the onset of the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was going. I felt patriotic. And up to that time, I had been studying engineering in college. I had 3 years of engineering. And the Air Force, considering my background, trained me to be a geodetic surveyor. And that was very unusual. Normally, when I'd go to these missile sites, even though they were not activated yet with a missile, they were always closed. The monoliths were there. We do 4 monoliths and do a precise quadrangle. And the work we did was very precise. It involved a lot of, it's basically all using star shots. And so here's a site that we arrive at, and the blast hatch is open. And we're nearing completion of the star observations. We had been to the other 3 monoliths, and I was at the monolith at the next to the hatch. And it was probably about 1:30, and a unidentified flying object came from the north and stopped right over us. I would say it was probably about altitude of 300 feet or so, maybe a little higher. It's a little hard to tell in the dark. It was round. It had, I would estimate its diameter at about 50 feet, kind of like a pretty large, like a wingspan of a B-52, something in that range. It's pretty large. It seemed to have pulsating lights going around it, and it had a white light from the center looking down into the silo. There was no wind, there was no noise. It only stayed there maybe 20, 30 seconds at most. And then I just remember, I'm staring up at the stars, right? I'm a pretty keen observer of what's above me here in the celestial sphere up there. And I just said to myself, what if this thing beams us up and takes us off to some distant place and never returned to Earth again? I mean, this is going through my head here while this thing's above me. And then from this dead stop, it shoots off to the east, just like now you see it, now you don't. It just poof.
So what's the general, I don't know, what do you guys think is, if there was a message, excuse me, if there was a message that these beings were sending us, right? If there was something that they were trying to tell us, right? What would it be, right? They're flying over our nuke sites, disabling the nukes. You have all this testimony, and it's not like it just happened then. There's been other instances in more recent past where it has happened that's remained classified that we haven't heard about. I believe one happened in 2012 that may be in the public, that you can look it up, maybe declassified. I'm not quite sure of that, but they're telling us something here, right? We're playing with fire with these weapons that we really don't understand. And you look at all the tests that we did. I believe the United States did like 1,200 of these atomic tests, and also the hydrogen, the big ones. Um, Imagine what that did to the planet, and just think about like the rate of cancer in today's society. And I think a lot of that's related to us playing with this material that we don't quite understand. And you look at today's global situation, and it's a scary time, especially if you have children, 'cause you wonder what's the future going to look like. And apparently, when you look at the ancient structures that are around the world, the pyramids, the Kailasa Temple in India. You look at some of the places in South America like Pumapuku and these crazy monolithic structures that we would have a difficult time creating today. Like, you ask engineers and stuff today, like, could we do this? They're like, maybe, but why? You know how much money it would cost and the machinery you would need and the cranes and like there's no reason for us to even do it. And yet they were doing it back then, right? Without cranes, without these supposedly without this advanced technology. And I'm saying that to say this, that it's apparent that human civilization has risen and fallen, and our technological capabilities, our advancements, same as the population. It's risen and then it collapses. It rises and then it collapses. Um, Maybe um, mass casualty events like the flood that we've read about, that we were all, if you ever went to Bible study as a child, you heard about Noah's Ark and all that. And it appears that something like that did occur. People speak of a mud flood and, you know, an ancient civilization that was on the planet at one time. You look at the Vedic texts of India, they're so old, the Mahabharata and stuff. And they speak of flying Vimanas, and actual battles going on in the sky. And more recently, people are speaking about this Tartaria thing. Now, I don't know, maybe it wasn't called Tartaria, but I think they're onto something. I think there was definitely a empire, and they say that the victors write history. They're the ones that write the history books, the victors. You know what I mean? So I just want to pose to you, like, imagine if we would have lost World War II, right? The Allies, okay? Say the Axis would have won, Japan, Germany. Imagine what the history books would be read, what they would look like. We wouldn't we would have a totally different understanding of history. So I propose to you, how do we know that the history that we've been taught is real? If it's obvious that if the war would have went the other way, back in the 40s or whatever, and Germany and Japan won, what would our history books look like? And how long did it take us to realize that Christopher Columbus wasn't having turkey with the Indians, on Thanksgiving? What were we taught in school about Christopher Columbus? Pilgrim. You know, and then we learn about Cortez and these. Christopher Columbus didn't land on Plymouth Rock; he landed down in Central America, and they did some atrocities, man, to for gold and other things. They didn't understand the culture, so it took us a long time to learn that history. Not only that, but just look at women's rights. Like a lot of people don't know that not long ago, women couldn't even vote, man. I mean, it was to us, it was long ago, but in the whole history of the world, it wasn't that long ago that women didn't have any rights at all. That they were basically considered like property when you married. A lot of people don't know that. That they call it suffrage. There's a lot of things that we don't. Still, a lot of people don't know about our history. They try to keep a lid on it. They don't want to look at it. You know, and that's just one aspect. There's many other things that I could use examples of. And I know I'm kinda going off topic here. We were talking about, the military and UFOs. Yeah, but I want you to look at the global picture right now with Ukraine, Russia, all that. Not only that, but the things that's going on in the Middle East, and we're at a tipping point, right? And they're talking about this 2027, the last pope, and, at, St. Peter's Basilica, they got these frames where the pope's picture's in the frames, goes all the way around the I guess it's a cathedral, I don't know. But there's only one frame left, and there's no room to put another one. And this guy Malachi made these predictions, like 1100 or something, and these saints, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Diana Pasulka, but she's spoken of like saints having these mystical experiences, and that he believes that a lot of these that she's been in the Vatican archives, she's read these stories, and she believes that a lot of them are um, non-human intelligences, UFO type contact experiences, like orbs coming into a nun's, I guess, nun's little sleeping room, and she has this mystical experience and she ended up becoming a saint. These things, I don't know the exact names. I'm not too familiar with a lot of them, but I'm sure you can look them up. If you read Diana Pasulka's book, American Cosmic, I think she goes into a lot of this stuff. And you look at the ancient experiences, just the stories in the Bible, like Ezekiel with the wheel in the sky and stuff like this. And I'm basically just strengthening this proposition that this has been a thing for centuries and centuries and thousands of years. This isn't a new phenomenon. We're just waking up to it. We were so materialistic in our ideas and in our science, and a lot of people don't even know that our mathematics breaks down. At certain points. We don't have a firm grasp on reality like we think we do, and this goes for mainstream, uh, you know, discipline. You know, um, they won't admit it. A lot of the times when they come across something that they just don't understand, they just make up something. They just try to explain it away. And this is what they do. A lot of mainstream archaeologists do to try to explain, like Kailos, the temple, and the Sirion, and, you know, Saqqara, in Egypt, and all these crazy things that there's no logical explanation for how they got there other than an advanced civilization put them there. And I don't think that the Egyptians that we know were responsible for those structures. I think they just kind of inherited them because they lived on the same land. I believe that there was, like I said, ebbs and flows in the world population. That there's been numerous collapses of the human population, and probably a lot of you know times when we were experiencing a lot of prosperity, humankind. You got legends of Atlantis. And I'm going to say this about Atlantis, right? So Plato wrote about Troy, and Achilles, and a lot of people thought that was myth. And then one day they discovered Troy, and they realized that Troy was an actual place, and Achilles actually existed. So he wrote about Atlantis. A lot of people, a lot of mainstream archaeologists says, "No, Atlantis never existed," but they said that about Troy too. So it's something to think about, and it's scary. This 2027 thing, and a lot of people that are in the know saying that we're on borrowed time. Other people saying if the public would know the things that they know, we would be somber, self-reflective, and that we should hug our family. And these messages are very cryptic, but at the same time, they're telling us something. Is it possible, right? So you see the things that's going on with the powers that be on the planet Earth, right? These different governments and such. And I think that they know that the jig is up, right? So it's going to come out here. I'm pretty sure that the illusions that the authorities and these bureaucracies and power structures that control the planet's resources and populations, so that we have to work endlessly and at jobs that we really don't enjoy, and we live these lives where we're just scratching to try to get this money that's really just paper. There's no gold back, and then it's just meaningless paper for real. But we put this value on it. I'm not saying that people don't need money. You need money to live, but at the same time, you just look at this social structure that we've built, and I think these illusions that these authorities have over us are starting to fall away, and you see that by the events that are transpiring across the globe. And the rise with new social media, the YouTube channels and podcasts are becoming a new, way that people get their news. And how are these authorities going to react to these illusions becoming apparent to their populations? And I think we're seeing that right now with these conflicts that's going on. Just food for thought, And I hope you guys liked the show today. Again, you're watching UAP Truth 33. I'm John. I'm your host. Hey, man, let me know what you think in the comments. If you think I'm full of it, just let me know. If you think I'm onto something, you think this is actually a thing. If these illusions are actually falling away, and we're seeing evidence of that with a lot of the turmoil in the world that's been going on for decades now. I don't know. When did you wake up? When did you actually wake up and start seeing the illusions that these people were painting? When did you actually realize that you weren't being told the truth about a lot of things in history? There's like a saying, I believe, like, if you can control people's perception of history, you can control their present and their future. One of those thoughts. But let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comments, please. Like, share it to 2 friends, and I'll see you tomorrow.